Now, all of this work involves thousands of scientists. The main site is in Los Alamos, but there's actually multiple different satellite labs. Like there's a lab in Tennessee that's doing their own portion of the work. There's a lab in Chicago that's doing their portion of the work. And all of this needs to be managed. Most of these physicists don't even really know what they're working on exactly. They don't have the whole picture. They have their piece of the puzzle that they've been assigned to work on. And Oppenheimer is the guy whose job it is to look at all of these thousands of physicists and mathematicians and lab technicians and basically say, what's your strength, what's your weakness, what are the parts of this project that need to be accomplished, who's going to be doing which parts. And he's the one who manages and says which scientists are working on which pieces, what work needs to be done. He is a physicist in his own right, which is important because it allows him to understand what other people are doing. But his contribution is really organizational. He's the one who says which pieces of the project everyone needs to be working on.
Is he the only one doing that, or is there a team of people?
He's the head organizer. Yeah. So he's a really key organizational figure behind this. Some people will refer to nuclear bombs as Oppenheimer's toy. It's a way that they're referred to later.
Yeah.
There's a movie about it.
Is that why it's called Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's about Robert Oppenheimer.
Did not know that.
Now, when all these scientists agreed to work on the bomb, for most of them, the reason why they agreed is because they knew how scary Nazi Germany was. A lot of these physicists had come from Germany, so there's this Germany has a really strong reputation in physics. Think about the fact that Einstein fled from there, Lisa Meitner fled from there, right? There's a very strong reputation there. Germany also has the best rocket scientists in the world. People like Wernher von Braun, who built the rockets that were used to bombard London during World War II, and who later would be kidnapped by the US and used to build our spaceships. We literally didn't have good rocket scientists in the US, so we just stole Nazis and made the Nazis do it for us. It was called Operation Paperclip. It's a real thing. Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
So people pretty rationally had this fear that the Germans would be capable of building a nuclear bomb. And that given the level of atrocities that the Germans were committing, that if they were to successfully build this bomb, they might use it unless we had a deterrent. So for a lot of these physicists, that was the reasoning behind why they were willing to do this project. They thought that Germany was going to do it, and that they had to have it to stop the Germans. Now, the Japanese don't have a nuclear program, right? There's no risk of Japan getting a bomb. And what ends up happening is that before our bomb is actually finished, we end up defeating the Nazis in Germany. So the war in Europe is actually over before we have a functional bomb. But we are still at war with Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've read about the Axis powers being Germany, Japan, and Italy.
Yes.
But I haven't read that much about Italy being that dependent.
At this point in time, Italy is under fascist rule by Benito Mussolini.
Oh, I heard about it.
So, at this point in time, the initial reason why a bunch of people agreed to do this has disappeared. And suddenly you get these scientists who start going wait a minute, what have we been doing? How is this going to be used? And there are a bunch of scientists who, to their credit, go, oh no. What we have done is we have built a super weapon and handed it over to the US military. And if you look at what the US military is doing during this time period, when it comes to their treatment of Japanese people, things start to get really scary. If you were here in 5th grade, isn't there a unit on propaganda?
Oh, there is, yeah.
Have you seen some of those really deeply racist World War II caricatures of Japanese people?
Yeah.
They're upsetting to look at. They're very deeply racist. The ways in which people in America are talking about Japanese people are deeply upsetting. And again, it's dehumanizing. It's not thinking about them like they are real flesh and blood people, but instead there's this idea of what they are, and that idea is an idea that is less than human. The US has already laid the groundwork to make this easier by removing Japanese people from public view. Because if you're trying to say something dehumanizing about your Japanese neighbor, if you're trying to say something dehumanizing about Japanese people, and I go, when I think about Japanese people, I think about Nathan Tanaka, my boss, right? That doesn't work, because that's a real person that I have a relationship with. So if you're gonna do this kind of level of dehumanizing propaganda, one of the things that has to happen is removing those people from public view, which is part of why we end up seeing things like Japanese internment in the US, where all of these Japanese people are taken from their homes and thrown into these camps. And there are people at our school who are descendants of folks who were in these camps, right? And that's part of laying the groundwork for what's about to happen. But there is a group of scientists who realizes this propaganda is really dehumanizing. We've built a superweapon. We've handed that superweapon over to the US military. This is actually really dangerous. And you'll have to forgive me here because my photos stopped working, so I'm going to just show you some of these people. This is Leo Szilard. He's a Hungarian scientist, and he is at, all three of these people are at the Met Lab, which is the lab that's in Chicago. He figures out how to make the chain reaction work. There is J. Ernest, well, let me do Jasper Jeffries first. So this right here, let me scroll part way down. I'm sorry if the photos aren't in the slides like they're supposed to be. This guy right here, the black one right here, that's Jasper Jeffries. He's one of the lab technicians. There's J. Ernest Wilkins. J. Ernest Wilkins. Who is this fellow? Right, he's a mathematician who works there. You can see here's some color photos of him a little later. So he's a mathematician that works on this project. And a whole bunch of people at this Chicago lab start to realize what they've done and how it can be used. And they realize this situation is really, really scary. They have this fear, which is that if we unleash this weapon on the world, what's going to happen is everyone's going to build them, and then we are all going to be living in a perpetual state of fear around total destruction. We'll enter like an era where everyone is living in perpetual fear of the end of, like, literally the end of the world. Because this is the kind of weapon that is potentially a world-ending weapon if enough people have them and if enough of them are used. And they write a petition to the president. And the petition basically says, please do not use this on Japan. Do not use this weapon. It is devastation beyond me. Here, I can pull up the Szilard petition itself, just so that you can see the text. You don't have to read through this all the way through. But the petition is basically saying, if we use this, it is going to enter into an era of terror across the world. You don't need to use it on people to have a tactical victory. Yes, Zelda? Truman. What you actually just need to do is let people know that we have it. Like, do a test somewhere. Let people know that we have it. And then give Japan good terms for surrender. Let them know, right, if such public announcement gave assurance to the Japanese that they could look forward to a life devoted to peaceful pursuit in their homeland, right? If we were to do that, they say, Japan will surrender. Just give them a chance. Let them know the stakes. Give them the chance to surrender. Don't use this. But of course, this is like a secret government laboratory, and any communications that go out have to go out through like this layer of military access. And so they write this letter. 70 scientists at this lab sign this petition saying, please do not use this bomb on Japan. And the military never passes that
to the president.
To the president. The U.S. military keeps this petition secret. And what the U.S. military is saying to the president is things like, again, dehumanizing propaganda. They're saying things like, you know, the Japanese people only live for their emperor. They don't care about their own personal safety and well-being. Dehumanizing propaganda, right? This is not true, but they're taking things like, you know, the fact that there are kamikaze pilots, right? Pilots that go on missions that they die in. To be clear, many people die in war. Dying in war, a lot of American soldiers have been dying in war. But this is taken as evidence that people don't care about their own lives, that they're fully devoted to the emperor, they'll do whatever the emperor says. And basically the claim from the military is that the people of Japan, like men, women, children, are gonna fight tooth and nail every step of the way. And literally the claim is that you would have to go in a land invasion and fight every single 5-year-old in Japan, right? And again, any claim where somebody starts talking about oh, the children of this place are an inherent threat to us, very obviously you're well into the realm of deeply dehumanizing propaganda. But that's what's being claimed about the Japanese people. And the US government decides that they're going to drop this bomb. They don't say, hey, here's the terms for surrender first. They drop the bomb first. And I want to be super clear about this, because what we do with this, and this is our government, this is the US government, no one else in the history of the world has ever used a nuclear bomb. We bombed the city of Hiroshima. And in the city of Hiroshima, again, this is not a military target, this is a civilian target. We killed between 70,000 and 126,000 civilians. People who are not involved in the war, who didn't have a choice about whether their government was going to do this. Only about between 7 and 20,000 of the people killed are soldiers, the vast, vast majority, right? 10 to 1 were killing civilians over soldiers. And we don't stop there. We drop a second bomb on the city of Nagasaki, which is almost entirely a civilian target. That kills between 60 and 80,000 civilians and about 150 soldiers. Okay? So out of, 70,000 or so people killed, only 150 of them are legitimate military targets. The rest of this is just war crimes. This is just mass murder. Yes, Zelda?
Is that the same time or the same week?
I think there's about a 2-day gap in between them. They're pretty close one after another.
I read about this guy who survived both attacks. He was in Hiroshima for the first one, survived it, and then took a train to Nagasaki, and then it was bombed 2 days later. But he survived it, and I read an article.
Well, lucky that he survived, but unlucky that he went to
I'm like,
Nagasaki.
that is kind of crazy.
And I can't overstate how scary these weapons are. If you are close to where these bombs go off, then people just instantly were incinerated. Folks who were a little bit farther away were grievously injured. A little bit farther away, you have folks who are experiencing long-term health effects, things like cancer. And then there were folks who were really far away but were looking in the direction of the city when it happened, whose eyes were burned out, who were driven blind by just how bright this explosion is. This is us. This is the United States. No one else has ever done this. We are the only country that has ever dropped a nuclear bomb on folks. And I want us always to remember the conditions that made this possible. The decision to replace real flesh and blood human beings worthy of empathy and respect and care with an idea of something scary and dehumanizing. That's what enables this kind of trust. Oppenheimer will say about it, some people laughed, some people cried, many were silent. And then he'll go on to talk about this line from Hindu scripture and say, I am become death, destroyer of worlds. And that warning from the Szilard Petition about how this would enter in an age of fear is exactly correct. Because what follows this is the Cold War. And decades of children ducking under their desks in nuclear bomb drills in the same way that we have lockdown drills. Yeah?
Wait, how would that help with the storm?
It would. Unless you were really far away.
Also, wasn't there like a radioactive bit around, like people got killed because of the radioactive material?
Say that again?
There was radioactive material released when the bombs
Yes.
went off, so weren't people killed because of that
Yes.
as well, even if they weren't close
Yep.
enough?
So
Outside of the, this is just the like straight up killed. There are even more people who will die over a longer time frame.
Yeah.
So how like big is the area? Was the area that you would like die in?
Think like 100 city blocks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, think like Manhattan.
like the entirety.
Yeah, I think you could probably use one of these songs to take out some. I want to be like, I'm sorry that this lecture ends on like such a down note, but this is the very last lecture in the series, so you have successfully made it through the history of the atomic theory unit. Start thinking about what theses you might have. What are some takeaways you have from this? What do you want to argue about? Begin to think about those essays, and make sure you've got all your notes in order.